Hi, and welcome to Week 9, Part 2, Japanese Art After 1200. Ancient Japan in brief. People have been living on the chain of islands known as Japan or Nippon since about 30,000 BCE. The Neolithic Jomon period, from about 14,000 to 300 BCE, is so called for the cord-like decorations on ceramics found from this era, which you can see here. Jomon period ceramics are fascinating for a number of reasons. First, it appears that people were making ceramics in Japan as early as 14,000 years ago, which is at least 6,000 years earlier than most cultures in the world. Secondly, a large percentage of Jomon period ceramics are highly decorative, having what are described as flame and crown-like protuberances on the lips of the vessels. This makes many Jomon period vessels impractical and implies a precocious use of ceramics for purely ceremonial or ritual purposes. It's probably during the late phase of the Jomon that Japanese people first start to practice Shinto, the indigenous religion of Japan. Shinto, which means way of the gods, is an animistic system which includes a belief in kami, spirits that inhabit places and things. The most important of these kami is the sun goddess Amaterasu Omikami, who is associated with the emperor and is emblematic of Japan itself. Nippon means origin of the sun. Practitioners of Shinto seek purification and the achievement of the principles wabi, purity and humility, and sabi, stillness and rusticity. Shinto practice is not congregational and was very informal until the introduction of Buddhism to Japan during the Yayoi period, when it appears that Shinto became more ritualized. The Yayoi period is also the time when weaving and bronze casting were introduced to Japan and Korea, to Japan from Korea. As in China, the introduction of bronze to Japan initiated the social stratification between those who had weapons and ritual objects and those who did not. Hierarchic centralized social systems, also imported from Korea, gave way to an imperial government within the Kofun period. As in other cultures, the emperor in Japan was considered the embodiment of a deity. The Japanese imperial dynasty originated in 660 BCE. The Kofun period of 300 to 710 CE is so called for the number of large burial mounds, or kofun, that date to this era. The mounds were often surrounded by haniwa, like this one you're seeing on the screen. Haniwa means clay circle, and this refers to that these protective images, like the one on the screen, were topped on hollow cylinders or cones that were thrust into the ground and surrounded in a circle around the burial mound. The inner Neiku shrine at Ise also dates to this era. The Neiku shrine is dedicated to the supreme kami Amaterasu Omikami, from whom the emperor's family is believed to be descended. The Neiku shrine is kept by priestesses that are members of the royal family. The shrine embodies wabi and sabi. It is rustic, made with no metal brads or nails, and only dyed with natural stain. It is also rebuilt every 20 years from natural and traditional techniques, so it is constantly renewed and purified. Inside the Neiku, which can only be entered by a member of the royal family, are a mirror, a jewel, and a sword. Here you can see the Neiku shrine that was rebuilt in 1993, sort of peering up above the fenced-in area which is excluded to most people, and it was actually rebuilt just recently in 2013. Mahayana Buddhism was imported to Japan by way of Korea and became the state religion during the Asuka period of 552 to 645 CE. Wood structures called pagodas served as Buddhist reliquaries tended to by Buddhist monks. The Horyuji kondo and pagoda, you can see the kondo here and the pagoda there, are among the oldest surviving wooden architecture in all of Japan. The pagoda is derived originally from the Indian stupa, which in China was translated, you'll recall, through the form of the Han Dynasty watchtower. In Japan, the wooden pagoda has multiple levels, with swooping eaves overhanging each level. The pagoda serves the same function as the original stupa. Buddhist practitioners walk around the pagoda, which is said to contain relics of the Buddha. The kondo next door stores a wealth of Buddhist art, some from Korea, that the faithful can use for inspiration, like in the Shaka Triad that you're seeing on the screen. The Kamakura period from 1185 to 1392 saw the emergence of a clan-based military rulership in Japan. The Minamoto clan, victors of the preceding civil war, established the position of the shogun or high general. Daimyo or local lords and samurai warriors from rural clans eventually became the most powerful force in Japan, with the high general or shogun as the real political power behind the emperor in a feudal reciprocal system. Art during the Kamakura period is highly influenced by Buddhism, which is still extraordinarily popular. Buddhism, which is known as Chan in China, was especially influential over scroll painting, which was inspired by Sung Dynasty art of China. Monk sewing, which you can see on the screen, is similar to Huineng chopping bamboo from Part 1 in its celebration of an everyday activity as an opportunity for meditation. Sculpture during the Kamakura period is also frequently referencing Buddhism, and a highly realistic style of portraiture was used in depictions of famous Buddha priests like Kuya here and priest Shinjobo Chogen here. Arguments over the true ruler of the shogunate prompted a civil war that was finally resolved with unification in the Muromachi period. The Muromachi or Ashikaga period, 1392 to 1573. During this period, the power of the shogun was waning, and the power of local daimyo was on the rise. Zen Buddhist painters studied Chinese Chan art of the Sung dynasty. Painting had already taken an abstract turn in the Kamakura period with the introduction of Zen Buddhism to Japan. Zen Buddhism resembled early forms of Buddhism, which emphasized enlightenment through a personal spiritual journey achieved through meditation. It was also very popular among the samurai class. This type of painting style preferred by Zen Buddhist monks resembled Chinese landscape painting, but it was even more forceful and spontaneous than Chinese shuimo. Haboku, or flung ink style, was invented by Sesshu, who could create a landscape on a hanging scroll with a few simple, strong marks. Zen Buddhist practitioners who painted for meditative purposes were called Zenga painters. Along with paintings, Zen Buddhists could create and tend to Zen gardens. Zen gardens were dry gardens of gravel and stones, with some small manicured shrubs or trees. Zen gardens were like the landscapes of hanging scroll paintings, with gravel representing empty space or light washes. The gardens allowed monks an opportunity for meditation through work. The Momoyama period was a brief and unstable but extraordinarily creative period in Japanese history from about 1573 to 1615. Architecture and its decoration vary from the sumptuous gold that you can see in the Swan Castle or the Swan Palace above to the simple natural structures and objects associated with the tea ceremony or cha no yu. The Momoyama period is also a time of Western and Christian influence on Japan. Contact with Portugal brought new weaponry, including guns, to Japan, which made the defensive structure of this castle, the Himeji Castle, even more necessary. Castles and other governmental structures, like the Juko Inn in Kyoto, were often decorated in gold fusuma, or sliding screens, painted with landscape scenes in delicate colors. Initially, Portuguese Jesuit missionaries were welcomed by the daimyo, and they seemed to distract the samurai from Zen Buddhism. However, Catholic influence was eventually deemed too great, and some 100,000 Japanese were converted during the Momoyama period. By the end of the period, Westerners were effectively barred from entering Japan. During the Momoyama period, tea became an important element of Zen meditation, and the tea ceremony was an intimate event of refined Zen discussion. The tea ceremony, or cha no yu, was developed by Sen no Rikyu during the Momoyama period. The event is a social gathering, but it's also ceremonial in the care that is taken to follow procedures. Chan no Yu reaffirms Shinto ideas of wabi and sabi. The tea room of a house was crafted to be a rustic setting, with mud and straw walls, which you can see on the screen, the straw within the mud. Plain, plain tatami mats, which you can see there, and plain paper shoji screens, which you can see here and there. While the ritual of the tea ceremony appears informal at first, it's actually highly organized and reflects Confucian ideals of respect. To enter the Taian tea room, for example, designed by Master Senno Rikyu, one had to at once bend down and climb over the window-like entrance called the Nijiriguchi. Discussion within the tea room is quiet and refined, with a focus on the artwork, flowers or other beautiful object that occupies the tokonoma niche. The utensils used for the preparation of the tea were usually made in the raku-ware technique, or raku-ware. Created by the Chojiro family, raku is a roughly textured earthenware clay body. Though Japan had knowledge of the potter's wheel, raku tea bowls were built by hand, often in shapes that looked asymmetrical, imperfect, and even lumpy. But these rough, rustic-looking utensils were prized highly above more refined porcelain. The tea bowl would be shaped to fit well in the hand. Slip and glaze and natural color was preferred, and a crackled appearance was also aesthetically pleasing. The Tokugawa or Edo period of 1615 to 1868. The Edo period is so called for the new capital, which modern name is Tokyo. During the Edo period, there is a renewed centralization of government under the shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, in 1603. In this era, local daimyo and samurai are forced to reside in Edo for a large portion of the year. This was justified by Confucian concepts of loyalty. However, practically, it meant that the families of the daimyo and samurai were exposed and vulnerable while their husbands and fathers were in Edo. This functioned to keep the daimyo and samurai loyal and to discourage rebellion. This increasingly repressive government was perhaps surprisingly peaceful. It may also surprise you to know that during this era, Japanese people led a relatively egalitarian lifestyle. Public education and art patronage were available to most people. The growing merchant and samurai classes in Edo influenced new art forms. Color woodblock printing, which was invented in China, was brought to Japan in the 8th century. In the Edo period, color printing was a cheap, fast way to make art that could be purchased by just about anybody. Favorite images among the Japanese patrons of all classes were the ukiyo-e, which means images of the floating world. Ukiyo-e prints depict behind-the-scenes city life of courtesans, geisha, kabuki stars. All city scenes and landscapes were popular. You can see a few examples here. Kitagawa Utamaro's competitive showing of beauties. So you can see a lady backstage at a beauty pageant, getting ready, blotting her lipstick, and someone looking in the mirror in this one. And here you can see an image of an actor, Ichikawa Danjuro. These artists often cropped their figures and compositions in really interesting ways. It seems that the low prices and the fact that the patrons were so-called regular people allowed artists to experiment with subject matter and with the design of the images. The ukiyo-e often had a somewhat abstract feel, especially pieces like this one, due to the cropping and use of pattern and flat color. The rustic aesthetics of the tea ceremony extend to courtly arts in the Edo period. The Katsura detached palace and its tea house demonstrate elements of the Shoin architectural style. The shoji screens, which you can see here, can be opened to the out of doors and blur the lines between the interior and the exterior. The exterior is highly rustic and plain. Meiji Restoration and the Modern Era. During the Meiji Restoration period of 1868 to 1912, there's a decline in the power of the shogunate, and the emperor once again is in the ultimate rulership position in Japan. Japan opens again to trade with the West. There's a desire to combine Japanese tradition with Western technology in order to keep up with Western culture and to avoid the possibility of colonization. Some artists take this Western-friendly attitude. The Meiji Restoration produced many yoga or Western-style oil painters like Aoki Shiguro, Asai Chu, and Fukushima Takeji. While the subject matter is Japanese, like in Paradise Under the Sea, which we're seeing here. Yes. So while the subject matter is Japanese, yoga or Western-style artists paint in an impressionistic and pre-Raphaelite styles of the West. The backlash against Westernization of Japanese art prompts a new style, Nihonga, which attempts to return to a native Japanese style. Yokoyama Taikan's Floating Lights utilizes the traditional colors on silk format in Japanese art. Japanese and Korean artists are very active participants in late modern and postmodern art of the 20th century. We will view that work in a later chapter. So that wraps up this week on China, Korea, and Japan. Next week, we look at art of the Americas.